The rain had slowed to a mist by the time morning stretched over the quiet streets of Maplefield, a small town tucked between two highways that never stopped humming. Even on an ordinary weekday, the place seemed suspended in a kind of gentle stillness, where the biggest excitement might be a new flavor at the local ice cream stand or someone repainting their porch. People liked it that way, predictable, safe, uncomplicated. But every story that begins in a quiet town carries a drift beneath it, the kind that hints the peace won't last. Ethan Wells never minded Maplefield's calm. At 33, he had grown into the rhythm of steady days and simple routines. He spent most mornings working at a modest auto shop that sat on the edge of town, a place that smelled of rubber, warm steel, and old radio music leaking from a dusty speaker. Ethan liked working with his hands. Engines made sense to him. Machines told the truth so long as you knew how to listen. He didn't have much of a reputation beyond being helpful, polite, and slow to speak. Folks said he had a kindness about him, the kind that wasn't loud or showy, the kind that made strangers trust him without understanding why. But he also kept to himself, carrying something private inside him, something that made him step with a certain caution at times, particularly around people he didn't know well. That morning had started just like the dozens before it. He'd woken early, brewed coffee, and sat for a minute at his small kitchen table, letting the steam rise like a quiet companion. His apartment wasn't anything special. One bedroom, a soft couch, and a shelf holding a few books he'd never quite finished. But it was his, and for Ethan, that sense of having carved out a corner of the world for himself mattered. He left home right on schedule, driving his old silver pickup toward the shop. The sky was still overcast, stretching gray across the horizon like a curtain that hadn't yet decided whether to open or close. The scent of wet pavement drifted in through his cracked window, familiar and grounding. Traffic was light as he made his way along Route 49. A pair of cyclists in reflective vests moved like slow shadows along the shoulder. A distant train called out somewhere behind the hills. Nothing unusual. Nothing stirring. Except the car he spotted a mile ahead, pulled over on the side of the road, hazard lights blinking softly like a distress beacon. He slowed instinctively. It wasn't unusual to see someone pulled over along that stretch, but something about the vehicle, a white sedan angled a little too sharply toward the ditch, made him pay attention. As he drew closer, he noticed the driver standing just outside it, arms folded tightly, lowered head, blonde ponytail dampened by the mist. She looked worried. He eased his truck to a crawl, then pulled over onto the shoulder several yards behind her. Ethan didn't move right away. He stayed in the driver's seat for a moment, hands resting on the wheel, weighing the moment as he always did. He knew how things could look. A man pulling up behind a stranded woman on a quiet stretch of road. No matter how good his intentions were, assumptions could appear where they didn't belong. Still, he couldn't drive past someone who clearly needed help. So he stepped out, slow and considerate, keeping a good distance. "Ma'am?" he called gently, raising one hand. "You okay?" The woman startled and turned. Her face softened with a mix of relief and embarrassment. "Oh, yes, sorry," she said. I got a flat tire. Completely my fault. I hit a piece of metal on the road. And of course, I've never changed a tire by myself." Her voice wavered between frustration and nerves. She looked young, late 20s maybe, dressed in business casual clothes, the hem of her coat brushing her knees. Ethan offered a small nod. "Do you have a spare in the trunk?" "I think so," she said. but I don't really know what to do with it." "Well," he replied, "I can help if you'd like." He kept his tone soft, giving her plenty of room to say no. Her eyes slipped briefly toward his truck, then back to him. Whatever she searched for, she seemed to find it. "Yes," she said. "Thank you. Really." They walked to the back of her car. She opened the trunk, revealing a spare tire, a jack, and a lug wrench still wrapped in the manufacturer's plastic. Ethan crouched beside the damaged tire and took a closer look. The metal shard was still embedded in the rubber, a sharp piece of something from someone else's bad luck. "You're fortunate the rim isn't bent," he said. "It's a clean puncture. The spare will hold up just fine." She let out a breath she'd been holding. "I was on my way to a meeting," she said. "I didn't expect my day to start like this." "Most people don't set out thinking they'll get a flat," he replied, a quiet hint of warmth in his voice. He worked steadily, explaining each step in case she wanted to learn. She watched intently, as though memorizing something important. Occasionally she knelt down to get a closer look, her hair falling forward before she brushed it back again. When he loosened the lug nuts, she flinched at the scraping sound, but leaned a little closer afterward, curiosity brightening her face. "Does this happen often on this road?" she asked. "More than it should," Ethan said. "There's construction a few miles down. Debris ends up all over the place." "Lucky me," she murmured. But there was a soft humor in her voice now, the kind that emerges when fear ebbs and relief settles in. "Where were you heading?" he asked. "Downtown Maplefield," she said. "I work at Morgan and Tate Realty. It's my first month there. I'm trying not to look like a disaster in front of my boss." "Everyone has off days," Ethan said. "Better a flat tire than something worse." When he finished, he lowered the car back down and tightened the lug nuts with practiced precision. The morning mist had started to lift, though a lingering coolness brushed along the road, like a quiet reminder that the day was still waking. She looked at the repaired wheel, then at him. "You just saved me," she said, her voice soft. "Not saved," he said. "Just helped." "No, really. Thank you." She extended her hand. "I'm Claire." He hesitated the smallest moment before taking it, mindful of the grease on his palm. "Ethan." Her smile warmed. "I'm glad you stopped." He nodded once more and stepped back. "Drive slow on the spare. If you need a real replacement, the shop I work at can take care of you." "Which shop?" she asked. "Harper's Auto Service, on Elm Street." "I'll look for it," Claire said. "I owe you." "You don't owe me anything," he said quietly. But she shook her head, a certainty settling over her. Some people deserve thanks. He didn't quite know what to do with that. Compliments often sat awkwardly in his hands, like something too fragile to hold properly. He nodded again, offering a small smile, then walked back to his truck. As he drove off, he glanced at her through the side mirror. Claire stood near her car, watching him go, hands tucked around her elbows as the mist softened around her. By the time he reached the auto shop, Ethan had slipped back into the rhythm of work. But his thoughts drifted unexpectedly to the encounter on the road. He replayed small details, the anxious way she'd looked at her car, the relief in her voice, the gentle shape of her gratitude. It stirred something low inside him, something he didn't have a name for. Not attraction exactly. More like the quiet ache of knowing he'd stepped briefly into someone's troubled morning and made it lighter. The shop was just as he left it. Tools scattered, coffee mug half full on the counter, notes pinned haphazardly to a corkboard. His coworker, Mark, lifted his chin in greeting. "Morning. You're late," Mark said, though there was no real reproach in his tone. "Stopped to help someone on the road," Ethan replied. "No surprise there," Mark muttered with a half-smile. "One of these days you're going to help the wrong person and end up in trouble." Ethan didn't respond. He simply washed his hands at the sink and got to work. But the comment lingered. The wrong person. Trouble. He knew Mark didn't mean anything by it. He said things like that often, joking in the way small-town men joked. But for Ethan, the words touched an old uneasiness. Not everyone saw him kindly. Not everyone looked at a stranger the same way Claire had. And that was something he carried with him quietly. Still, the day passed without any strange twists. He fixed a leaking radiator, replaced a serpentine belt, and spent nearly an hour wrestling with a stubborn, rusted bolt. By closing time, his muscles hummed with the kind of tiredness that felt earned. He returned home, cooked a simple dinner, and settled on the couch. Yet Claire drifted through his mind again. Not intensely, not romantically, but with a kind of tender clarity. She had been grateful in a way that made something in him loosen, as though a part of him accustomed to caution had briefly relaxed. He didn't expect to see her again, but Maplefield had a way of folding people back into one another's lives, especially when they least expected it. The next day began like the last. Coffee, quiet, a drive through pale morning light. Ethan didn't think about anything unusual as he turned onto his street, ready to head toward the shop. But when he stepped out of his apartment building, he noticed something that didn't belong. A black SUV idled across the street, not moving, not passing by, just sitting there. The windows were tinted too dark to see inside. The engine hummed low, steady, almost watchful. Ethan slowed his steps, unease settling into his chest like a cool weight. In Maplefield, a vehicle like that stood out. It looked too new, too polished, too deliberate for a town where most folks drove practical cars with faded paint or the occasional truck. He tried not to stare, but his eyes kept drifting back to it. Something in his mind traced a quiet line back to the day before, to the woman on the roadside, to the kindness exchanged, to the feeling that maybe he'd stepped into a moment more significant than he realized. He took a breath, steadying himself. The SUV door opened, and someone stepped out. The story had only just begun. The door of the black SUV eased open with the kind of slow, deliberate movement that could unsettle even the calmest person. Ethan stood still beside the steps of his apartment building, keys in hand, heart pressing quietly against his ribs as though trying to gauge the shape of this moment before it unfolded any further. Morning light stretched across the street in a pale, uncertain wash, catching the glossy paint of the vehicle in a way that made it look almost out of place here. A man stepped out. Tall, clean-shaven, dressed in a dark jacket that hinted at some kind of formal work, though not quite business, not quite law enforcement either. His hair was neatly combed, his posture steady. Everything about him carried a controlled energy, like someone who'd learned long ago how to move without creating unnecessary noise. The SUV door shut behind him with a muted sound. He didn't approach immediately. Instead, he stood there, looking at Ethan with a calm expression that revealed nothing. The kind of look that felt like it was assessing, gathering details, forming conclusions. "Morning," the man finally said, voice steady. Ethan swallowed. "Morning. You're Ethan Wells, correct?" When someone you've never met knows your full name, The air changes. Even in daylight, the moment dimmed around the edges, sharpening itself into something uneasy. "Yes," Ethan said, cautious. "Can I help you?" The man nodded once, then glanced briefly back at the SUV, as if checking something unseen before returning his attention. "We'd like a word with you." "We?" The back door of the SUV opened. Another person stepped out. A woman this time, wearing a gray blazer, short hair tucked neatly behind her ears. She appeared younger than the man, though not by much, and held a small folder at her side. Her posture was straighter, her gaze more direct. "Yes," she said. "We." Ethan felt the morning shift again. It wasn't fear exactly, more like a trembling awareness, a sense that he'd brushed against something he didn't understand. He looked from one stranger to the other, waiting. "Who are you?" he asked. The man reached into his jacket pocket slowly, carefully. Ethan tensed, instinct tightening inside him, but the man simply withdrew a small identification card. He held it out, offering a view without stepping closer. It wasn't a police badge, not officially. It had an emblem, something governmental, though unfamiliar, and a seal that looked legitimate. "My name is Daniel Ross," the man said. "This is my partner, Marie." No last name for her, Ethan noticed. "We're with a private security division," Marie added. "We're contracted for certain cases." "Cases?" Ethan echoed. "What does any of this have to do with me?" Daniel exchanged a brief look with Marie, then returned his gaze to him. "We understand you helped a woman yesterday morning, on Route 49. At that, the tension inside Ethan shifted in a new direction. Claire. The flat tire. The mist. The memory of her relief. "Yes," he said slowly. "She had a flat. I helped her change it. That's all." Marie stepped closer by an inch. Not enough to feel invasive, but enough that it was clear she wanted his full attention. "We'd like to ask you some questions about that," she said. Ethan didn't move. "What for?" Another brief exchange of glances between them, subtle but unmistakable. "It's important," Daniel said, "and it concerns her safety." Those words hit with a quiet, sinking weight. Ethan felt his breath hitch. Her safety? Did something happen to her? "That's what we're trying to determine," Marie said. "We'd appreciate your cooperation." Her tone wasn't threatening, but it carried an urgency, something gently pressing, guiding. Even so, hesitation curled itself around him. He didn't know these people. He didn't know if their badges meant what they said they meant. And something inside him, a lifelong instinct, warned him to be careful around strangers with authority. "What kind of questions?" he asked. Daniel looked around the quiet street before answering. "It would be better if we spoke somewhere else." That made the hesitation twist tighter. "I'm heading to work," Ethan said. "If you need to ask something, you can ask me here." Marie's jaw tightened slightly, though not in frustration, more like she respected the caution. "We understand your concern," she said gently. "But this involves confidential information. We're not asking you to come with us against your will. We're just requesting a short conversation, somewhere private." Ethan looked between them. Their faces were calm, patient, but there was something beneath that patience, something watchful. His heart beat a little too fast. He had done nothing wrong. He'd only helped someone. Yet here he was, being approached by strangers in a black SUV. "Give me 5 minutes," he said finally. Let me grab my things. Daniel nodded. We'll wait. Ethan went back inside his building, but his steps were uneven, his thoughts unsteady. He entered his apartment and closed the door behind him, leaning against it for a moment. The quiet space felt unusually fragile. He wasn't afraid of them specifically, but he was afraid of what their presence meant. Something had happened. Something involving Claire. He took a slow breath and grabbed his phone, hesitating before placing it carefully into his pocket. Then his wallet. Keys. His hands moved automatically, though his mind churned. When he stepped back outside, the pair were standing beside the SUV, waiting. Marie offered a small nod. Daniel gestured to the open rear door. "Just a conversation," he said. Ethan climbed into the SUV. The interior was spacious, clean, and surprisingly quiet. Marie slid in beside him on one side while Daniel took the front passenger seat. The driver, whom Ethan hadn't seen until now, glanced at him briefly through the rearview mirror, a young man with pale hair and a steady gaze. The vehicle started moving. Ethan's pulse thudded softly in his ears as the SUV turned down a side road. He wasn't trapped, the door wasn't locked, and no one made threatening moves. But the uncertainty pressed on him. Marie opened the folder on her lap. "Yesterday," she said, "you encountered Claire Morgan." "Yes." "You helped her with a flat tire." "Yes." "Can you tell us everything you observed? Anything she said? Anything unusual you noticed?" Ethan shook his head slightly. "It wasn't unusual. She hit a piece of metal. She didn't know how to change the tire. She seemed stressed about being late for work. That's about it." Marie listened with focused attention, eyes steady on him. "Did you notice anyone else on the road?" Daniel asked from the front. "No, it was quiet. There was a pair of cyclists earlier, but not near her car." "Did she receive any calls while you were with her?" "No." "Did she mention anyone or anything concerning?" "No," Ethan said. "She just wanted to get to work." Daniel leaned back. "She works at Morgan and Tate Realty." "Yes, she told me," Ethan said. "Why?" Silence hung for a moment. Heavy, weighted. Marie closed the folder, her hands folding over it. "Claire never arrived at work yesterday." The breath left Ethan's chest in a slow, stunned exhale. "What do you mean?" Daniel turned slightly in his seat. "After leaving you, she drove toward town. She never made it there." Ethan swallowed hard. "Is she missing?" Marie's gaze sharpened gently. "We're trying to avoid conclusions. But yes, she did not go home. She did not show up at work. And her phone last pinged in an area we are currently investigating." A cold ripple moved through Ethan. The image of Claire, her smile, her relief, felt like it had been suddenly pulled into a darker place. "I don't understand what this has to do with me," he said. "I only helped her with her tire." "We know," Marie said, "and we're grateful you stopped. But you were the last confirmed person to see her." The sentence hung in the air like a heavy stone. Ethan felt it hit hard. A quiet, rising ache filled his chest. He had done nothing wrong. And yet the weight of that statement pressed against him in ways that stirred old memories. Moments when he'd been looked at with suspicion for reasons that had nothing to do with truth. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "We're not accusing you of anything. You're not a suspect. But your information could help us understand the timeline," Marie added. "And we need to know if she said anything that might point to why she didn't make it to town." Ethan tried to think back. Each second became sharper in his memory now. "She thanked me," he said. "She asked the name of the shop I worked at. She said she hoped she wouldn't look bad in front of her boss. She seemed nervous but normal. Nothing else." "Did she appear afraid of anything?" Daniel asked. "No." "Did she look like she was being followed?" "No," Ethan repeated, though now the question twisted in his mind, making him question his own recollection. Marie leaned back a little, her expression softening, not with pity, but with a kind of quiet understanding. "We're asking these questions because something unusual happened shortly after she left your location." Ethan looked at her. "What happened?" "We found her car," she said. "Abandoned." Ethan felt his body tense. "Where?" "In a small service lot behind a closed cafe on the east side of town," Daniel answered. "The driver's door was closed. The car was locked. The spare tire was still on. No sign of struggle visible from the outside." "Inside?" Ethan asked. "We're still analyzing," Marie said, "but there was no wallet, no phone, no bag." Ethan's breath grew shallower. "You think someone took her?" Another glance between them. "We think it's possible," Daniel said carefully, "and we're working quickly." They drove for several more minutes, turning onto a quieter road outside of town. Fields stretched on both sides, thin lines of trees marking property boundaries. The SUV eventually slowed and stopped near an old parking area that overlooked a small patch of woodland. Marie gestured lightly toward the door. "We thought some privacy would help. People in Maplefield talk. We didn't want this conversation to cause rumors." Ethan stepped out, the cold air brushing across his face, grounding him. The space felt open yet strangely tense, as though holding its breath. Daniel approached him first. "Ethan, we need you to understand something. You're not in danger, but you may be connected to something without realizing it." "Connected how?" Marie stepped forward. "Claire's family hired us. They reached out last night after she failed to come home. They wanted discreet help before involving broader channels." "Discreet?" Ethan asked. "Yes," Daniel said. "Because Claire received an anonymous text message the day before she went missing. A message her family found when they searched her computer. It was forwarded to her email automatically." Ethan felt his stomach drop. "What did it say?" Marie looked at him with steady seriousness. "It said, 'You're not safe. They're watching.'" He stared at her, the words echoing through him. "Watching? Who?" "We're trying to find out," Daniel said. "Claire didn't tell anyone. And then yesterday, something happened that we believe triggered her disappearance." "What?" Ethan asked. Marie hesitated only a moment. "You helped her." The statement wasn't accusatory, but it carried something deeper, something that made Ethan feel a faint sting inside his chest. "I didn't do anything," he said quietly. "We know," Daniel said immediately, "but someone might not have liked that you talked to her, or that she stopped." Ethan's pulse thudded harder. "Are you saying someone followed her?" "We believe so," Marie said. "Not when you were there, but after. And her family confirmed she told them recently she felt like someone had been watching her when she drove home at night." Ethan felt a deep unease settle into him. The morning mist from yesterday replayed in his mind, but now shadowed by darker possibilities. "So why come to me?" he asked softly. "Because we think she trusted you," Marie said. "And because we think whoever followed her might assume you know more than you do." That sentence rolled through him like a slow, heavy current. Daniel took a small step closer, voice gentler. We needed to warn you. Ethan looked down at the ground, breath trembling. Warn me about what? About the possibility that someone might approach you, Marie said. Ethan lifted his head. Why would they approach me? Because you were involved in the last moment of her normal day, she said. Even if it was by chance, whoever took her might think she said something to you, or that you noticed something. Ethan's heartbeat grew uneven. I didn't notice anything. People who grasp at control seldom believe in chance, Daniel said quietly. They believe in patterns. They believe in threats where none exist. You helped Claire. That might be enough for them to see you as a loose end. The phrase loose end hollowed out something in Ethan's chest. He stepped away for a moment, needing air. The sky above was still a calm gray, unbothered by any of the tension unfolding below. But Ethan felt as though everything around him had thinned, the world suddenly delicate and uncertain. I didn't want to get mixed up in anything, he said. I was just helping someone. Daniel's voice softened. Good people often end up entangled without meaning to. That doesn't mean they're in the wrong. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, trying to steady the tightness inside him. What do I do now? Continue your routine, Marie said. Go to work, live normally, but stay aware. Are you saying someone might actually come looking for me? Ethan asked. Daniel's eyes held a quiet sincerity. We're saying we'd rather prepare you for that possibility than ignore it. Ethan turned toward the horizon, where thin lines of cloud drifted lazily across the sky. A heaviness settled into his chest. Not quite fear, not quite dread. More like the recognition that something had shifted permanently. Yesterday had been ordinary. Today was not. Marie stepped closer, her voice calm but firm. If anyone approaches you, anyone you don't know, do not engage. Do not go anywhere with them. Call us immediately. Do you think they'll come to my home? He asked. We don't want to assume, Daniel said. But we'd advise keeping your doors locked. And if you notice anything unusual, anything at all, call us. Ethan exhaled slowly. His thoughts felt scattered, his emotions tangled in too many directions at once. Do the police know about this? He asked. Her family hasn't gone to them yet, Marie said. They wanted to gather information first, to avoid causing alarm or speculation. They intend to contact authorities today. Ethan nodded weakly, though none of it felt steady inside him. Daniel pulled out a small card and handed it to him. This has our number, day or night. Ethan took it, the card surprisingly light between his fingers. We'll be keeping an eye on the area, Marie said, quietly. But it's important you don't warn anyone or change your routine visibly. If someone is watching, sudden changes might tell them you know something. The SUV ride back to his apartment was silent. Ethan stared out the window, watching the fields blur into houses, the houses blend into town, everything slipping past like a world he no longer fully recognized. When they dropped him off, Marie offered one last reminder. We believe you can help us, even if you don't realize how yet. He didn't respond. He just nodded, stepped out, and watched the black SUV drive off. His entire morning had unraveled into something he didn't know how to hold. He stood there for a long moment. Cars passed by in their usual rhythm. People headed to work, the world continuing in its steady pace. Yet Ethan felt suspended, caught between yesterday's quiet kindness and today's unsettling warning. He went to work. He tried to focus, But throughout the day, the normal sounds of the shop, the clang of metal, the whir of tools, the steady rumble of engines, felt different somehow, sharper, more intrusive. Mark's voice occasionally drifted over, casual and familiar, but Ethan found it hard to respond with his usual ease. In quiet moments, his mind slipped back to Claire, to her smile, to the way she had thanked him, and then to the thought of her frightened, taken, lost somewhere. Every time he thought of it, a subtle ache threaded through him. Late afternoon crept in. Ethan considered calling Marie and Daniel, asking for updates, but he hesitated. They had said they would handle it. They had also warned him to act normal, so he continued his day. It wasn't until closing time, when the soft rustle of leaves brushed the shop windows, that Ethan stepped outside and noticed something. His truck door was slightly ajar. He froze. The air felt thinner, closer. He scanned the lot. Mark's car was gone. The other cars were locked up. No one else was around. Quiet hung in the air like a fragile thread. He approached slowly, each step measured. The truck door wasn't open enough to reveal anything inside, but just enough that he knew he had not left it that way. He reached out, hand trembling slightly, and pulled the door open wider. There was something on the driver's seat. A single folded slip of paper. No envelope. No name. Just placed there. Ethan felt a pulse of cold move through him, sharper than before. He picked up the paper with careful fingers and unfolded it. The message was written in a neat, controlled hand. "You should have kept driving." Ethan's breath left him in a sharp, stunned exhale. Fear slid into him now. Not dramatic, not loud, but deep and steady, settling like a shadow that had finally found its shape. He looked around the empty lot again, searching the edges, the corners, the tree line beyond the fence. But nothing moved. No one appeared. He stepped back from his truck, gripping the note tightly. Someone knew who he was. Someone had been close enough to leave this. Someone blamed him for helping Claire. He reached for his phone. But before he could call, a voice behind him spoke. "You weren't supposed to get involved." The words hit him like a sudden plunge into cold water. He turned quickly, heart pounding. A figure stood near the far edge of the lot, half hidden by the dimming light, facing him. And Ethan realized, with a slow, rising certainty, that the conflict he had stumbled into was far deeper than he'd been warned, and far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The rising action waited just ahead, its shape beginning to form. The figure at the far edge of the lot didn't move right away. He stood as though waiting for Ethan to fully register his presence, letting the moment stretch until the air grew tight. Ethan's pulse thudded unevenly, his breath catching somewhere between fear and disbelief. For a second, he wondered if this person had been standing there the whole time, blending into the shadowed edges of the trees, waiting for the right second to speak. The dim light made it hard to distinguish details, but the shape was unmistakably that of a man. Broad shoulders, straight posture, hands at his sides. Nothing about him appeared openly aggressive, yet something in the stillness of his stance felt deeply wrong, like stepping into a room that should be empty only to realize someone has been watching you the entire time. Ethan forced himself to stay still. Running would only draw attention. Approaching would be reckless. So he steadied his voice, though it came out tight. "Who are you?" The figure didn't answer immediately. He took a slow step forward, the gravel crunching under his feet, and Ethan saw more of him. Dark jacket, pale hands, hair combed neatly back, His expression was calm, too calm. "You should have kept driving," the man repeated quietly. "That's all you had to do." Ethan gripped the edge of his truck door, feeling the cool metal against his fingers grounding him. "I don't know what you're talking about." The man tilted his head slightly. "You helped her." "I helped someone with a flat tire," Ethan said. "That's all." The man's eyes flicked briefly toward the note still clutched between Ethan's fingers. "And now you've been warned." A chilly breeze swept across the lot, stirring a loose scrap of paper near the fence. Ethan's mind raced. If this man knew about the note, he might have been the one who left it, which meant he had been close. Too close. "Where is she?" Ethan asked, voice low. The slightest shadow of a smile touched the man's face. "Not your concern. Never should have been." The world around Ethan seemed to shrink to a point, narrowing until only this stranger's face remained in focus. Fear pricked at the back of his neck, but something else rose with it. A faint ache of protectiveness, the memory of Claire's gentle gratitude. "I'm not involved in whatever is going on," Ethan said. "I didn't know her. That's the only reason you're still standing." The man took another step, slowly closing the distance. Ethan's throat tightened. "What do you want from me?" "To make sure you understand what happens when people ignore warnings," the man said softly. "Walk away. Forget yesterday even happened." Before Ethan could respond, the man shifted, not toward a weapon or an aggressive stance, but something subtler, a lowering of his shoulders, a narrowing of his gaze, a faint tightening of his jaw. It was a silent message. "I'm not here to negotiate." Ethan's phone was still in his pocket. He didn't dare move for sast. He forced his voice steady again. "If you're trying to threaten me, I'm telling you." The man cut him off. "Threaten? No, this isn't a threat." He paused, letting the silence draw out. "It's instruction." Ethan's pulse jumped. Something deep inside him stirred. Not anger, not defiance exactly, but a pressure building inside his chest. A quiet voice reminding him that no one deserved what Claire had gone through. And if he could help in any way, he could not simply back away. The stranger seemed to sense that shift. His eyes hardened. "Walk away," he repeated, "or you'll regret the part you chose to play." Then he turned without another word and walked toward the line of trees bordering the lot. He didn't rush. He didn't hide. He simply moved with the cold certainty of someone who believed his warning would be enough. Ethan watched until the man disappeared through the brush. Only then did his breath fully escape him, trembling as though his lungs had been waiting for permission. He quickly reached for his phone, hands shaking, and dialed the number Daniel had given him. It rang twice. "Ethan?" Daniel's voice answered immediately, alert. "Someone was here," Ethan said, barely keeping his voice steady. "He left a note in my truck, and he just confronted me." "Where are you?" Daniel asked sharply. "At the shop, the lot behind it." "Stay exactly where you are," Daniel said. "Do not move. We're on our way." The call ended before Ethan could respond. He stood there, gripping the note so tightly the edges curled against his palm. Tension gathered inside him like a cold weight, leaving no room for denial. This wasn't an accidental entanglement anymore. Someone had made him part of this, whether he wanted it or not. He paced the lot slowly, scanning every corner and shadow. 15 minutes felt like an hour before the black SUV pulled in fast, braking sharply near his truck. Daniel stepped out immediately. Marie followed, her expression tense. "What happened?" she asked. Ethan handed them the note. Daniel read it, jaw tightening. "Did you see who left this?" "He talked to me," Ethan said. "He told me to walk away." Marie's gaze sharpened. "What did he look like?" Ethan described him. Height, build, hair, clothing. Each detail coming faster now, like something being pulled from him by necessity. "Did he touch you? Did he reach into your truck? Anything physical?" Daniel pressed. "No," Ethan said. "He just talked." Marie exhaled slowly. "That means he didn't want to escalate yet. He wanted to intimidate." Daniel glanced toward the woods. "And he's bold enough to watch him up close." "We need to move quickly," Marie added. "This is no longer a quiet investigation." Ethan felt the words sink into him. "What do I do?" "Go home," Daniel said. "Pack a small bag. Essentials only." Ethan stared. "Why?" "Because you're not staying at your apartment tonight," Marie said gently. "It's no longer safe for you to be somewhere predictable." "I haven't done anything," Ethan said quietly. Daniel's expression softened slightly. "No, but sometimes danger doesn't care about innocence. It cares about convenience." A chill ran through Ethan again. He looked between Marie and Daniel, realizing the rising current pulling him forward wasn't going to go away. This was his life now, a life that had shifted in the space of 2 days. Daniel continued, "We'll relocate you somewhere temporary, just until we understand what we're dealing with." Ethan swallowed hard. "And Claire?" "We're working on it," Marie said. "And this," she held up the note, "might help us." They drove Ethan home with the same careful, deliberate route they'd used earlier, though the atmosphere was different now. Tension filled the space like static building before a storm. When he stepped into his apartment, he saw it with new eyes. Every corner, every window, every shadow felt suddenly fragile. He grabbed a duffel bag, filling it with clothes, toiletries, and his wallet. He hesitated at the shelf of books, but left them. He didn't know how long he'd be gone. Marie stood by the door, giving him space but watching quietly. When he finished, she stepped aside as he left the apartment and locked the door behind him. The SUV took him out of town, past quiet neighborhoods where porch lights flickered on as dusk settled. Daniel finally spoke after several minutes. "You handled today better than many would." "I didn't handle anything," Ethan said softly. "I just listened." "That's handling it," Daniel replied. They turned onto a side road leading to a small rental cabin near the edge of a wooded area. Not isolated enough to be dangerous, but private enough to avoid unwanted attention. "This is temporary," Marie said. "We'll rotate a patrol near the area. You won't be alone." Ethan nodded numbly. Inside, the cabin was simple. A bed, a small kitchen, a sitting area, a quiet stillness that felt both comforting and unsettling. "We'll check on you in the morning," Daniel said. "Keep your phone near you." Ethan wanted to ask questions, many of them, but the words felt tangled inside him, so he only nodded as they left. Hours passed. The cabin grew darker. Crickets chirped outside, a sound he'd always found calming, though tonight it felt like a thin curtain covering something else. He sat at the small table, staring at the note again. "You should have kept driving." He wondered where Claire was right now. Whether she was scared, whether she was hurt, whether she knew he was trying to help. A sudden knock struck the door. Ethan froze. 3 soft knocks. Not loud, not hurried. He stood slowly, heart pounding, and approached the door. "Ethan?" Marie's voice called softly. Relief flooded him. He opened the door. She stepped inside quickly, closing the door behind her. Her face was tense, her movements sharp. "What's wrong?" Ethan asked. "We intercepted a message," Marie said, "from the same person who approached you." Ethan's stomach tightened. "What did it say?" Marie looked him directly in the eyes. "He said you were given your chance, and the next time he speaks to you, it won't be with words." Ethan's breath hitched. Marie continued, voice quiet but steady. "He's escalating faster than we anticipated, and that means things are going to get more dangerous before they get clearer." "What does that mean for me?" Ethan asked. Marie paused for a moment, her expression full of something between warning and sincerity. "It means," she said gently, "that you're at the center of this now, whether you want it to be or not." Ethan sat heavily on the edge of the bed, the room tightening around him. The world outside felt like it was pressing inward, closing the distance. Marie stepped closer, lowering her voice. "But we're not letting anything happen to you. You helped someone in need. That doesn't make you a target. It makes you a good person. And good people deserve someone standing beside them." Something warm, fragile, and unexpected flickered through Ethan then. An ache shaped like both fear and gratitude. Marie placed a small tracker device on the table. "Keep this on you. If anything happens, it alerts us instantly." He nodded slowly. She hesitated before speaking again. "There's something else." Ethan lifted his gaze. "We found new evidence near Claire's abandoned car." Ethan stiffened. "What kind of evidence?" "A footprint," Marie said quietly. "Fresh, heavy, larger than hers, leading into the woods." Ethan's breath trembled. "Did it lead anywhere?" Marie shook her head. "It disappeared after a few yards. Whoever it was knew how to cover their tracks." Ethan felt his pulse quickening, each beat echoing in his chest. "And there's more," Marie added. "We found something underneath her passenger seat." He waited, bracing himself. "A burner phone." Ethan frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means she wasn't just being followed," Marie said. "It means she was trying to hide something." Silence filled the cabin. "She was in the middle of something before she met you," Marie said softly. "Something dangerous." Ethan's thoughts raced. "But she didn't say anything to me." Marie nodded. "Which tells us 2 things. She didn't know how much danger she was in, and she trusted strangers more than we realized." A knot tightened in Ethan's chest. Tender, painful. "Why would she trust me?" he asked quietly. Marie studied him for a moment. "Some people sense kindness even when they're scared. She probably felt safer with you than she did driving alone." Ethan didn't. The wind pressed against the thin cabin walls as if trying to slip inside, carrying with it a hush that felt less like weather and more like a warning. Ethan stood by the window, arms braced against the frame, watching the darkness gather at the edge of the woods. The night outside was deep and watchful. Every tree looked like a figure standing guard. Every rustle carried the possibility of someone moving where they shouldn't. Marie had left only 20 minutes ago, but the room felt different already. Quieter, heavier. Ethan wasn't sure if it was fear or the strange sense that something around him was shifting, tightening, preparing to reveal itself piece by piece. He kept the small tracker device on the table within reach, its blinking green light a small assurance in the dim cabin. But even that quiet pulse felt too fragile to rely on. He couldn't shake Marie's final words. She was in the middle of something before she met you. Something dangerous. Ethan tried to steady his breathing. He had spent most of his life staying away from situations that could pull him into trouble. Always careful, always mindful. And yet here he was, caught in the center of someone else's storm, pulled into a story he had never asked to be part of. But Claire didn't ask for any of this either. That thought returned again and again, like a soft ache beneath the ribs. He paced the small cabin, listening to the creaks beneath his steps, the occasional groan of timber in the wind. His phone glowed once on the table. A message from Daniel. "We're sending an update soon. Stay inside. Stay alert." He placed the phone face down and drew a breath. Staying alert was easy. He didn't think he could be anything else right now. A sudden noise outside made him stiffen. A crunch. Soft but close. Footsteps. Ethan froze, turning toward the window. The angle didn't show much, just a strip of moonlit ground and the outlines of trees. He took a step toward the door, but stopped himself. Opening it would be reckless. The footsteps paused, then moved again. Slow, careful, coming closer. Ethan grabbed the tracker device and held it tightly, ready to press the alert button. His pulse hammered in his ears, drowning out the sounds of the night. Another step, then silence. Someone was just outside. "Ethan?" He jumped at the sound. Soft, familiar. Marie. He exhaled shakily and unlocked the door, opening it quickly. But it wasn't Marie standing on the porch. It was a man. Not the one from the parking lot. This one was older, maybe late 50s, with thinning hair and glasses that reflected the porch light. He wore a beige jacket, hands held slightly raised as if to show he meant no harm. "Please don't be frightened," the man said, breathing hard as though he had been walking quickly. "I need to talk to you." Ethan's grip on the tracker tightened. "Who are you?" "My name is Andrew Morgan," the man said. "Claire's father." Ethan's heart lurched. Claire's last name. The worry etched into his face, his hands trembling at his sides. It all clicked together. "You shouldn't be here," Ethan said. "Marie and Daniel—" "They don't know I came," Andrew interrupted, "and I didn't want them to." Ethan hesitated. "Why?" Andrew looked over his shoulder, scanning the tree line as though expecting someone to appear at any moment. "Because I learned something tonight," he said quietly. "Something they haven't told you." Ethan frowned. "About Claire?" Andrew nodded slowly. "May I come in?" Ethan studied him, his shaking hands, his uneven breathing, the desperation that hung around him like a weight. Whatever brought him here had shaken him deeply. He stepped aside. Andrew entered quickly, closing the door behind him, his eyes darting around the room as if confirming they were alone. Ethan motioned for him to sit, but Andrew remained standing. "I don't know how much they've told you," Andrew said, voice trembling. "About Claire, about the danger she was in." "Only that she was followed," Ethan said, "and that she might have been involved in something she didn't understand." Andrew let out a breath that sounded half like a sob and half like frustration. "It's worse than that," he said. "Much worse." Ethan's chest tightened. "What happened?" Andrew swallowed hard, gripping the back of a chair to steady himself. A few months ago, Claire came to me asking for advice. She said she had found something suspicious at work. Financial records at the real estate firm where she'd just been hired. Ethan listened intently. She thought some properties were being purchased under shell companies, Andrew continued. But the money didn't match the reported buyers. Large sums were going through accounts that didn't belong to anyone real. Ethan's pulse quickened. Illegal activity? Andrew nodded. Money laundering. She thought her firm was part of it. Ethan stared. Did she tell the police? Andrew shook his head. She was scared. She said she needed more proof. She didn't trust her boss. And she didn't trust herself to handle it alone. The weight of the revelation settled into the room like a heavy fog. She hid what she found, Andrew said, on a burner phone, in case anything happened to her. The one Marie mentioned, Ethan murmured. Andrew grimaced. And tonight, I found something else. He reached into his jacket with trembling fingers and pulled out a small USB drive. Claire left this behind, he whispered, hidden in a drawer, labeled for me. Ethan stared at the drive as if it were something dangerous. What's on it? He asked. Andrew swallowed. Enough to bury half the people involved. Enough to make them desperate. Enough to make them want her gone. A chill moved through Ethan. She told me, Andrew said softly, voice cracking, that if anything happened to her, I'd know what to do, but I didn't think it would actually. He pressed a hand to his forehead, fighting back emotion. Ethan stepped closer. You think the people involved took her? Andrew nodded. And now they're coming for anyone connected to her. Ethan's pulse raced. Me. Yes, Andrew whispered. You. Before Ethan could speak, a sudden vibration filled the air, his phone buzzing on the table. He grabbed it. Daniel calling. He answered. Hello? Ethan, listen carefully, Daniel said, voice sharp with urgency. Do not open your door. Do not let anyone inside. We're on our way. Someone may be heading toward your location. Ethan's eyes widened. He looked at Andrew. The color had drained from Andrew's face. Daniel, Ethan said slowly, Claire's father is here. There was a long, deadly pause on the other end. Ethan, Daniel said, voice low and firm. Claire's father is at the county sheriff's office. He's been there for the last 2 hours. Ethan's blood ran cold. He turned toward Andrew, but Andrew wasn't looking at him anymore. Andrew was reaching into his jacket. Ethan stumbled backward. The cabin seemed to shrink around him as Andrew, not Andrew, pulled out something metallic. Ethan dropped the phone. The fake Andrew stepped forward. You weren't supposed to be part of this, he said quietly. But you are now. Ethan's heart pounded so loudly it drowned out everything else. He grabbed the nearest thing he could, an old wooden chair, and hurled it toward the man. The chair collided with him, giving Ethan just enough time to sprint toward the back door. His breath tore through his throat, adrenaline flooding every inch of him. He burst through the back exit, stumbling into the cold night. Branches scraped against his arms as he pushed himself into the woods behind the cabin. Darkness swallowed him instantly, the moonlight barely breaking through the canopy. Behind him, a door slammed open. Footsteps pursued him, heavy, determined. Ethan ran harder. The forest floor was uneven, roots catching at his shoes, branches whipping across his face. His lungs burned, his legs screamed, but he didn't stop. The woods felt endless, a maze of shadows twisting around him. He forced himself deeper into the darkness, weaving between trees, trying to make his path unpredictable. But the footsteps stayed behind him. Close. Too close. "You can't run forever," the man's voice called from somewhere behind him, steady and cruel. Ethan pushed harder, crashing through a patch of dense underbrush. The thorns tore at his arms, but he barely felt them. His foot caught on a hidden root. He fell hard. The ground hit him like a punch to the ribs. Pain shot through his chest and arm. The world tilted. He tried to push up, but a boot pressed down on his wrist. Ethan gasped. The man stood over him, breathing hard but steady. In the moonlight, his face was clearer now. Sharp features, cold eyes, the faint trace of a satisfied smirk. "You should have stayed out of it," the man whispered. Ethan struggled under the pressure, his hand straining. "But now," the man continued softly, "we can end this before it becomes a bigger problem than it needs to be." He reached into his jacket. Ethan's pulse hammered. But then, a noise split through the woods, fast, sharp, a spotlight beam sliced between the trees. "Stop!" Daniel's voice. The man jerked his head toward the light. Ethan surged upward, knocking the man's balance off just enough to scramble back. Pain cut through his arm, but he pushed through it, stumbling toward the voice. More lights cut through the trees. Footsteps approached fast. Voices called out commands. The man cursed under his breath and darted into the darkness, disappearing between the trees with shocking speed. "Ethan!" Daniel reached him first, gripping his shoulders. "Are you hurt?" Ethan tried to answer, but his breath was still shaking uncontrollably. Marie was close behind, sweeping her flashlight across the woods. "He went north," she said. "He knows the terrain." Daniel turned back to Ethan. "We need to move. Now." Ethan nodded weakly, letting Daniel guide him. Every muscle inside him trembled, but he forced himself to keep going, each step pulling him toward some faint sense of safety. They reached the SUV. Marie ushered him inside while Daniel checked the tree line one last time. Once they were on the road, Marie turned around in her seat. "Ethan, listen to me," she said firmly, her voice tight with protective urgency. "This is the beginning. They know where you are now. They know you have information, and they are not going to stop." Ethan swallowed, throat tight. He said Claire found something she wasn't supposed to. Marie exchanged a quick, concerned look with Daniel. "How do you know that?" Daniel asked. "He came pretending to be her father," Ethan said. "He had a USB drive. He said it had evidence." Daniel exhaled slowly. "Then whatever Claire uncovered is bigger than we thought." Marie nodded. "And they're willing to impersonate family to get it back." Ethan looked out the window, watching the trees blur past, in streaks of shadow and moonlight. Fear clung to him like a second skin. "Where's Claire?" he whispered. Daniel didn't answer immediately, but when he did, his voice was low. "We're going to find out," he said. "But to do that, we need you alive." Ethan closed his eyes as the SUV sped into the darkness. The story wasn't ending. It was only beginning to break open. The SUV carved through the night with a trembling urgency, its headlights slicing across the narrow back road like twin blades of pale fire. Ethan sat in the back seat, shoulders pressed against the door, every inhale shallow and uneven. The forest outside blurred past in shadowed streaks. The danger he had just escaped clung to him like cold sweat, a reminder that the man who had posed as Claire's father had been willing to corner him alone in the dark. And he hadn't come for conversation. He had come to erase a loose end. Daniel glanced at him occasionally through the rearview mirror. Worry carved subtly into the set of his jaw. Beside him, Marie spoke into a secure phone in a low, steady tone, relaying details about the confrontation and giving coordinates. She didn't say Ethan's name aloud, but every word carried the weight of urgency. When she finished the call, she turned in her seat, her expression a careful mix of calm and seriousness. "Ethan," she said softly, "you're safe now. We got to you in time." Ethan shook his head slightly. "I didn't feel safe. Not for a second." Marie's voice gentled even more. "I know, but you kept your head clear. That matters." He didn't respond. His mind replayed the man's approach. The false name. The smooth lies. The hand reaching inside the jacket. How easily kindness had been used as bait. How easily trust could be weaponized. Daniel cleared his throat as the SUV rounded a curve. "We're not going back to the cabin. It's compromised now." "Where are we going?" Ethan asked. "A new location," Marie said. "More secure, and closer to where we can monitor movement." Ethan looked out the window again, watching the silhouettes of houses fade into more open land. It wasn't fear that settled into his chest this time. It was a dawning understanding that this wasn't going to end quietly. Not for him. Not for Claire. Not for anyone who crossed paths with the people behind her disappearance. The SUV slowed after several more miles, turning onto a private drive that led through a stretch of land marked by a tall, worn wooden fence. The lane snaked between old oak trees before opening into a clearing where a farmhouse sat back from the road. 2 stories tall with wide windows and a deep porch. Its lights glowed softly, warm but isolated. The SUV rolled to a stop. "This is a safe house," Daniel said as they stepped out. "Previously used, not connected to your name or hers." Ethan followed them inside. The air smelled faintly of cedar and something clean, like a place used sparingly but kept in working order. The living room held old furniture, the kitchen looked unused, and the rooms carried a strange quietness, like a place waiting for a story to be placed inside it. Daniel checked the locks and windows while Marie guided Ethan to the table. "Sit," she said gently. "There's something we need to go over." He sat. She placed her phone and a notepad between them. "You said the man who came to the cabin called himself Andrew Morgan," she began. "Tell me everything he said, exactly as you remember it." Ethan walked her through the entire encounter, how the man had introduced himself, the desperation he pretended to carry, the USB drive he'd shown, the fabricated story about Claire discovering suspicious activity at work, the implication that someone powerful wanted the evidence back. Marie wrote quickly, occasionally asking for clarification. "And the flash drive," she said. "Describe it." "Silver, small, no labels." Marie nodded. "He probably took it from her apartment the night she went missing." Ethan's stomach tightened. He had her things. "He had access," Daniel said from the doorway, "which means he's not acting alone, and he's not low level." Ethan swallowed hard. "Can you trace him?" "We're trying," Marie said. "But people like him, they don't leave footprints unless they want to." She reached across the table and placed her hand lightly on his forearm, her touch grounding without presuming. "I know this feels impossible, Ethan, but every detail you've shared helps us close the gap." Ethan nodded, though the weight inside him only seemed to deepen. Marie continued, "There's something else we need to discuss. He braced himself. "Claire," she said softly, "we found new information." He felt his breath catch. "Is she alive?" Marie hesitated. Not long, but long enough for the silence to bruise. "We don't know," she said carefully, "but there's no evidence she's been harmed. That's important. Whoever took her is still trying to get something, and if she's useful to them, she's likely being kept somewhere." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. Relief mixed with dread swirled inside him, tangled like threads pulled too tight. Daniel moved closer. "We received a ping from her burner phone earlier tonight. A very brief signal. It was shut down immediately after." Ethan leaned forward. "From where?" "A warehouse district outside of town," Daniel said. "Abandoned buildings, open fields, lots of places to hide someone." Ethan felt his heart speed up. "So she's nearby?" "Possibly," Daniel said. "Or the phone was moved to mislead us. Either way, we're investigating at first light." A quiet thickness settled in the room. Rain began to tap softly against the windows, adding a subtle rhythm to the tension. Marie spoke again, her tone slower, steadier. "Whatever you saw tonight, it's part of something that's been operating quietly for a long time." Claire stumbled into it. "You crossed paths with her. They don't know what she told you. That uncertainty is dangerous for them." Ethan looked up sharply. "For them?" Marie nodded. "People who operate in secrecy fear anything they can't control. Your involvement is a variable. Tonight proved they see you as a potential threat." Ethan rubbed a hand across his face. "I didn't even know her." "No," Marie said gently. "But you cared, and caring is unpredictable. Dangerous to people like that." The room fell silent again. Outside, the rain grew steadier. Daniel finally broke the quiet. "Get some rest. One of us will be awake all night. And we're close, I can feel it." But Ethan didn't sleep. He lay awake on the small bed the safe house provided, the ceiling faintly illuminated by the soft glow from the hallway. His mind churned through every detail: Claire's frightened gratitude, the man disguised as her father, the chase through the woods, the threat whispered through clenched teeth. Sometime past midnight, the rain slowed to a drizzle. Ethan sat up, unable to stay still. He stepped quietly into the hallway. Daniel was in the living room, scanning files on a tablet, his posture rigid with concentration. "Can't sleep?" Daniel asked, without looking up. "No," Ethan said. "I keep thinking about the fake Andrew, how he knew where to find me." Daniel nodded grimly. "He probably followed us earlier. We weren't as invisible as we thought." Ethan hesitated. "Why didn't he just finish it in the cabin?" Daniel finally looked at him, eyes sharp. "Because he wasn't there to kill you. He was there to get information first. You mattered enough to confront. But once you ran, once we arrived, he had to retreat." Ethan's chest tightened. "So he'll come back?" "Yes," Daniel said, "but he won't catch you off guard again." Ethan wasn't so sure. They spoke quietly until a faint vibration broke through the silence. Marie entered the room quickly, her phone in hand, her expression tight. "We just got another ping." Ethan stood abruptly. "From her?" Marie nodded. "This one lasted longer, long enough to trace with more accuracy." Daniel grabbed his jacket. "Where?" Marie hesitated just slightly before she spoke. The signal came from a farm supply warehouse outside the old industrial district. It's mostly abandoned. Ethan felt something thud inside him. Fear, hope, confusion, all knotted together. Daniel motioned toward the door. "We're going, now. Ethan, you're staying here." Ethan's instinct flared. "No." Marie looked at him sharply. "You're not trained for this. You've already been targeted once tonight." "And I'm not sitting here while Claire might be out there needing help," Ethan said, voice trembling with something that wasn't quite anger. "I won't hide while you risk everything." Daniel held his gaze for several long seconds. Ethan didn't look away. Finally, Daniel nodded once. "You stay in the SUV. You do not get out unless we say so." Marie didn't argue, but her jaw tightened with concern. They left the safe house quickly, the SUV bouncing down the darkened road as the clouds overhead began to break apart, letting slivers of moonlight slip through. As they drove, Marie outlined the location, an old agricultural storage complex, long since shut down, surrounded by overgrown fields. A cluster of buildings remained standing, a main warehouse, a smaller office structure, and a long, narrow barn. "When the phone pinged," Marie said, "it was inside the main warehouse." Ethan leaned forward. "Do you think she's there?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. "There's only one way to find out." The closer they got, the more the landscape changed. The trees thinned. The ground grew flat and wide. Rusted fences lined the road before vanishing into tall grass. Sheet metal roofs gleamed faintly in the distance, catching the moonlight. When the warehouse finally came into view, Ethan inhaled sharply. It loomed dark and hulking, a massive rectangular structure with broken windows and sagging doors. A gravel lot stretched out before it, cracked and uneven. Daniel killed the headlights and coasted the SUV the rest of the way in near darkness. "We go on foot from here," he said. "Ethan, you stay in the back. Lock the doors. If anything happens, you call the number I gave you." Ethan nodded reluctantly. Daniel and Marie stepped out silently, disappearing into the shadows. Their figures moved low and swift across the field, cutting through the darkness with practiced steps. Ethan watched them until they vanished behind the building. Then he waited. Seconds passed. Minutes. The SUV felt too small, the silence too loud. Then a faint sound, a metal clang. Then another. Ethan's breath caught. He strained to listen. A shout. Muffled. Far away. Then something else. Movement. Behind the SUV. Ethan froze. He reached slowly to lock the doors, but the click was too loud. Footsteps shifted. A shadow moved. Someone stepped into view behind the rear window. Tall, broad, familiar. The fake Andrew. Ethan's blood turned to ice. The man approached the SUV slowly, as if savoring every step. He reached the back door, placed his hand on the handle, and pulled. The door held. Locked. The man smiled faintly. Then he reached into his jacket. Ethan grabbed the tracker device, but before he could press the alert, something slammed against the SUV from the side. The entire vehicle rocked. Another figure. Then another. 3 men. Surrounding the SUV. Ethan's heart pounded wildly. He fumbled for his phone, hands shaking. Before he could dial, the fake Andrew stepped into the driver's view and tapped the glass with something metallic. A small device. He pressed a button. The SUV's locks clicked. Unlocked. Ethan choked out a breath. The door yanked open. Hands grabbed him, pulling him out violently. His feet scraped the gravel. The night air hit him like cold shock. He struggled, but the men were stronger, dragging him across the lot toward the warehouse. One shoved him forward. Another gripped his arm tightly enough to bruise. "Let me go!" Ethan shouted. The fake Andrew leaned close, his breath steady and cold. "You should have stayed hidden," he whispered. "But you followed us. And now—" He glanced toward the warehouse. "You get to see how this ends." The men shoved Ethan through a side door, the metal screeching as it opened. Inside, the air was stale and thick. The warehouse stretched wide and dim, lit only by a few flickering bulbs strung from the ceiling. Dust floated in the pale, trembling light. And there, against a beam near the center of the room, a figure sat bound to a chair. Blonde hair, a damp coat, her head lifted slowly. Claire. Ethan felt the world tilt. Her eyes widened the moment she saw him. "Ethan?" she whispered, voice hoarse. He surged forward, but the men yanked him back. Claire shook her head desperately. "No, no, why did they bring you here? You shouldn't be here." "Quiet," the fake Andrew snapped. He stepped between them, hands clasped calmly behind his back. "Now," he said, turning toward Ethan, "let's finish what should have been done night one." The warehouse door slammed shut, and the climax surged toward its breaking point. The warehouse felt colder than the night outside, as if the steel walls themselves had absorbed the fear and strain hanging in the air. Ethan's heartbeat hammered against his ribs as he stared at Claire, tied to the chair, her wrists red from the rope, her breathing shallow and uneven. The men who had dragged him in now stood in a loose circle, their presence heavy and watchful. The false Andrew took a slow step forward, confidence coiling through every movement. For a full second, nothing happened. The silence stretched, thick enough to choke on. Claire's gaze flicked between Ethan and the man standing before them, a warning shimmering faintly in her eyes. Then the false Andrew spoke, his voice calm and measured. "You were supposed to disappear quietly after the cabin," he said. "We gave you that chance, but you couldn't leave it alone." Ethan swallowed hard. "I wasn't looking for you," he said, breath shaky. "I just didn't want her left out here alone." The man tilted his head. "Chivalry. A quaint trait. But dangerous." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "People who meddle get crushed." Claire shook her head desperately. "He didn't do anything. He doesn't know anything." The man glanced at her with mild irritation. "Doesn't matter. He saw me. He talked to me. He's involved." One of the other men moved forward then, gripping Ethan's shoulder tightly and shoving him down to his knees. Gravel bit into his skin. Ethan grit his teeth, refusing to let fear overtake him completely. Claire let out a shaky cry, struggling against her restraints. "Stop," she pleaded. "Please, stop. This isn't necessary. I'll tell you whatever you want." The false Andrew chuckled quietly. "Claire, you've told us nothing useful so far, but perhaps our friend here will be more cooperative." He crouched down in front of Ethan, lowering himself to eye level. His expression was calm, almost pleasant, which made it all the more terrifying. "Where is it?" he asked softly. Ethan stared at him. "Where is what?" "The real drive," the man said. "The one she hid. The one with the evidence." Ethan blinked. I don't have anything. The man examined his expression carefully. His gaze was sharp, dissecting. You really don't know, he murmured. Fascinating. From behind him, one of the men scoffed. We should just finish it. Neither of them knows anything. Quiet, the false Andrew snapped. He stood, pacing a slow circle around Ethan and Claire. Something in his demeanor shifted then, as though he were reconsidering the direction of the moment. But before he could speak again, a distant sound cut through the warehouse. A low rumble. Engines. Several. The false Andrew stiffened. The men exchanged tense glances. Ethan's pulse spiked. Hope flickered, small but bright. The false Andrew narrowed his eyes, calculating. They're here sooner than expected. Claire inhaled sharply. Daniel, she whispered. The back door of the warehouse crashed open. Lights flooded the interior, blinding white beams slicing through the darkness. Shadows erupted into movement. Commands were shouted. Boots pounded across the gravel. Daniel and Marie burst through the doorway, flanked by 2 additional agents. Their posture was rigid with controlled urgency. Hands where we can see them, Daniel shouted. Chaos erupted. One of the men lunged toward Ethan, but before he could reach him, Marie fired a warning shot into the ground. The sharp crack echoed through the warehouse. The man stumbled back, hands raised. Another man bolted toward the far exit. Daniel's agents pursued him instantly, disappearing into the shadows. The false Andrew did not run. He simply stepped backward, retreating slowly into the dim space between 2 enormous storage crates. Marie moved toward Claire, kneeling at her side and cutting the ropes from her wrists with a small blade. You're all right, she murmured gently. You're safe now. Claire let out a broken sob of relief. Daniel reached Ethan within seconds, helping him to his feet. Are you hurt? I'm fine, Ethan said, though his voice trembled, adrenaline still shaking him from the inside out. A sudden noise, metal clanging, echoed from behind the crates. Daniel stiffened. He's still here. His agents fanned out, sweeping their lights through the gaps and corners. Ethan took a shaky step back as Daniel motioned for him and Claire to stay behind Marie. Then, a flash of movement. The false Andrew darted from cover, sprinting toward a side corridor. Stop! Daniel shouted. The man didn't stop. Daniel fired, not a kill shot, but a disabling one. The bullet struck the metal railing beside the false Andrew, ricocheting loudly. The man flinched, stumbled, then regained his footing, slipping into the shadows. Seconds later, the sound of a vehicle starting echoed from outside. He's escaping, one of the agents called. Block the exits, Daniel commanded. But by the time they reached the far door, gravel dust hung thick in the air outside. Tail lights vanished into the night. He was gone. The warehouse fell into a tense, echoing silence. Ethan sat down heavily, every bone inside him suddenly aching. Marie supported Claire, who leaned against her with exhaustion, her face pale and streaked with tears. Daniel returned, jaw tight, frustration simmering under the surface. We got 2 of his men. The other escaped with him. But you're both safe. Ethan ran a hand over his face. What happens now? Daniel looked toward Claire. First, she receives medical attention. Then we take her somewhere secure. Claire shook her head weakly. No, you don't understand. He still has the drive. He still has everything. We'll get it, Daniel said. One step at a time. Claire's voice broke slightly. He won't stop. He'll try again. Daniel glanced at Ethan. Which is why neither of you is going anywhere alone. Marie guided Claire toward the SUV waiting outside. Ethan followed. Though the walk felt surreal, each step an echo of everything that had unfolded inside the warehouse. The field was quiet now. The moon hung low above the abandoned buildings, casting long, wavering shadows. Two of the men who had kidnapped Claire were being handcuffed near the front of the warehouse, their expressions blank and resigned. Ethan paused, watching them. The false Andrew had escaped, but at least some part of the operation was broken tonight. Claire turned toward Ethan, her voice soft. "How did you get pulled into this?" "I stopped to help you change your tire," Ethan said, voice low. "That's all." Claire's eyes filled. "I'm so sorry." "You didn't do anything wrong," he said. "You were scared. You didn't deserve any of this." Marie glanced at them, her expression touched with something tender. She opened the SUV door for Claire, who climbed inside slowly. Daniel joined them a moment later. "We need to move. There's a possibility he'll try something else tonight." Ethan nodded. The SUV pulled away from the warehouse, leaving behind the cracked gravel and echoing emptiness of the place where everything had almost ended. Inside the vehicle, the silence stretched heavy with shock and unspoken questions. Claire sat beside Ethan, her breathing starting to steady, but her hands still trembling. Ethan turned to her gently. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "Just tired." Marie glanced toward the back seat. "We'll take both of you to a secure facility. You'll be safe there." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, exhaustion settling deep into his bones. But beneath that tiredness lay a strange mix of relief and determination. The danger hadn't ended, but Claire was alive, and they had survived something brutal. Several miles later, Daniel's phone buzzed with an incoming call. He answered quickly. "We got a break," a voice crackled on the other end. "The two men we apprehended, they talked." Daniel sat up straighter. "What did they say?" "They confirmed there's a second location," the voice replied. "Some kind of storage unit where they keep backup equipment and documents. They said the drive Claire hid might be there." Claire inhaled sharply. "That's it. That's what they wanted." Daniel ended the call and turned to Ethan and Claire. "We're going there next, but you two will stay behind with Marie. We can't risk exposing you again." Claire reached out instinctively, gripping Ethan's arm. "Be careful." Ethan nodded, offering her a small, tired smile. Marie led them inside the facility, a plain building with reinforced windows and a quiet, sterile interior. The lights hummed softly overhead. Daniel prepared to leave but paused at the doorway, his expression tightening thoughtfully. "We're close, he said. "I can feel it." Ethan nodded. "Bring it back." Daniel gave a faint smile and disappeared into the night. Ethan and Claire were escorted to a room with a small couch and 2 chairs. The moment they were alone, she turned to him, her expression cracking with emotion. "I thought I was going to die," she whispered. Ethan felt something shift inside him. Fear, tenderness, protectiveness, all stirring together. "You're here," he said softly. "That's all that matters." She wiped her eyes. "I never wanted anyone to get hurt because of me." "You didn't cause this," he said. "They did, and they chose to drag others into it." Claire leaned back, eyes closed. "I should have told someone sooner." He shook his head. "You were scared. You thought you were alone." Claire opened her eyes and met his gaze. I wasn't alone. Not really. Not after that morning. Ethan felt a quiet warmth rise in his chest, a fragile but steady ember. Marie entered the room after a few minutes, carrying 2 bottles of water. She handed one to each of them, her expression softening at the sight of them sitting close together. You did well today, she said gently. Both of you. Claire nodded. What happens now? We wait, Marie said. Daniel is checking the second location. If the drive is there, we'll finally have enough to bring everything into the open. Ethan exhaled slowly. And if it's not? Marie's eyes darkened slightly. Then the false Andrew still has it, and we prepare for whatever he does next. Hours stretched on. Claire fell asleep briefly on the couch, exhaustion pulling her into a shallow rest. Ethan sat nearby, watching her breathe, feeling an ache of protectiveness grow inside him. Marie stepped out occasionally to check updates, then returned quietly. Finally. Marie's phone buzzed. She answered quickly. Daniel's voice spilled through the line, urgent and steady. We found it. Claire stirred awake. Marie straightened. Are you sure? Yes, Daniel said. We have the drive. Everything she uncovered. It's all here. Names, accounts, documentation. It's enough to bring their entire network down. Claire pressed a hand to her mouth, tears forming in her eyes again, this time from overwhelming relief. Marie exhaled slowly, shoulders relaxing. We'll secure everything on our end. Ethan felt something inside him finally loosen, a tension he didn't realize he'd been holding so tightly. But, Daniel continued, there's a problem. Marie stiffened. What is it? He's not done, Daniel said. The false Andrew knows we have the drive. He's on the move, and we intercepted communication. He's coming for them. Marie's eyes widened. Ethan felt his pulse stutter. Claire sat up straight, fear flickering through her expression. Daniel's next words were low but clear. You need to move them, now. Marie ended the call and turned to Ethan and Claire, urgency tightening her voice. We're not finished yet. It's about to get harder before it gets better. Ethan stood, heart pounding. Claire stood too, gripping his arm, and Marie spoke the words that would push the story into its final arc. He's coming, and we have one chance to end this. The moment Marie spoke those words, the room shifted. The quiet, fluorescent hum overhead suddenly felt too loud, too fragile, as if the air itself had thinned. Ethan stood frozen, breath caught somewhere between fear and resolve, while Claire clutched his arm with trembling fingers, her eyes widening with an emotion he couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was something deeper. Exhaustion, disbelief, and a hope so fragile it clung to her like a final lifeline. Marie moved quickly. She opened a metal cabinet near the far wall, retrieving 2 small earpieces, a sealed first aid kit, and a narrow flashlight. Her movements were sharp and precise, but beneath that precision, Ethan sensed the undercurrent, urgency pulsing beneath every step. Both of you, stay close to me, she said. We're extracting to a secondary location. Daniel is coordinating a perimeter sweep, but we need to get you out of here before he arrives. Ethan swallowed hard. Where are we going? Somewhere he won't expect, Marie answered. Somewhere that buys us enough time to finish this. She helped Claire into a light jacket from the emergency supplies closet. Claire's hands were still shaking, but her voice steadied as she whispered, "I thought he wouldn't come after this. After everything tonight." Marie shook her head. "People like him don't quit when cornered. They strike harder." She turned to Ethan. "He's desperate now, and desperate men are unpredictable." They moved through the corridor toward the back exit of the facility. The long hall felt strangely quiet, each step echoing faintly despite their urgency. Ethan's stomach tightened with every shadow they passed, every corner that hid possibilities. The memory of being dragged from the SUV, the grip of hands on his arms, the cold air slicing across his face, all of it lingered like a bruise inside him. Outside, the sky was beginning to lighten at the faintest edges. Dawn was still far off, but the horizon carried a pale hint of blue. Marie unlocked the emergency vehicle, a plain black sedan with tinted windows, and ushered them inside. "Stay low," she warned. Ethan helped Claire into the back seat, then slid in beside her. Claire leaned into him instinctively, her breath trembling against his shoulder. He wrapped an arm around her, steadying the shake in her body with a gentle firmness. Marie started the engine, pulling onto the narrow service road behind the facility. Her eyes flicked constantly to the side mirrors, scanning every shape, every flicker of movement. Several minutes passed in tense silence. Then Claire finally spoke, voice soft and cracked. "All I wanted was to do my job. I didn't mean to find anything. I didn't want any of this." Ethan rested his hand over hers, grounding her. "You didn't do anything wrong." Claire shook her head slowly. "I thought if I ignored it, it would go away." But then the messages started, and then the eyes watching me on the road. And by the time I realized how deep it was, her voice faltered. I didn't know who to trust. Ethan listened quietly as she spoke, his chest tightening at the rawness in her voice. He thought of the morning he found her by the roadside, her trembling hands, her fragile smile, the lingering fear she tried to hide. She had been fighting long before he appeared in her story. Marie's voice broke gently into the moment. "The fault isn't yours. You stumbled onto something big, something dangerous. People who profit from silence get violent when someone starts speaking." Claire closed her eyes. "He said I had something that belonged to them, something that could ruin them." "You did," Marie said. "And now we have it." Ethan leaned forward. "Daniel still has the drive, right?" "Yes," Marie said. "He's transporting it to our headquarters now. Once it's secured, this entire case shifts." "Shifts how?" Ethan asked. Marie hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Once the evidence is logged, we can officially involve state authorities, federal agencies. The scale of this operation goes far beyond Claire's workplace. The people involved, there are names on that drive that will spark investigations across multiple fields." Ethan felt a ripple move through him. "So this ends with arrests." "Not just arrests," Marie said. "Dismantling." Claire took a shaky breath. "If he knows you have the drive, he'll try to destroy it," Marie said. "But he won't get close." The road stretched ahead in silence again, broken only by the hum of the engine. They traveled through back routes, avoiding main roads, weaving through fields and shadowed stretches of rural land. The first hints of sunrise began to touch the edges of the sky. Marie finally pulled into a small public park, closed at this hour, empty except for a row of trees and a quiet pavilion near the far edge. She parked beneath a heavy oak branch. Ethan frowned. "A park?" Marie nodded. "It's a midpoint, a false trail. Daniel is orchestrating a diversion. We wait here for the switch. Claire leaned against Ethan's shoulder, exhaustion pressing down on her. He could feel her pulse fast and fragile beneath her skin. "Try to breathe," he whispered. She nodded, though her breaths remained shallow. Minutes passed. The silence wrapped around them like an uneasy blanket. Then, with a sudden violence, the world cracked open. A truck slammed into the side of the sedan. Metal screamed, glass shattered. The force knocked the vehicle sideways, tossing Ethan and Claire across the back seat. The air exploded with dust and fragments. Ethan tasted metal, felt the impact reverberate through his bones. Marie shouted something, muffled, distant. The truck backed up, then surged forward again. Another hit. "Get out!" Marie screamed, kicking her door open. Ethan grabbed Claire's hand and pulled her across the shattered seat. They crawled out the opposite door just before another crash shook the frame of the car. Ethan dragged Claire behind a row of thick shrubs, pulling her down onto the damp ground. Marie rolled behind a picnic table, drawing her firearm with a steady hand. The truck screeched to a stop. Its headlights blazed in the dim morning light. The driver's door slammed open. The false Andrew stepped out. His face was twisted now, no longer calm, no longer collected. Desperation burned in his eyes. "Give me the girl," he shouted. His voice echoed across the empty park. "She has something that belongs to us." Marie crouched behind the table, steadying her aim. "You're outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Surrender now." The false Andrew laughed, a wild, unsteady sound. "Surrender? You don't understand what you're fighting." He took a step forward. "Where's Daniel? Where's the drive?" His head jerked side to side, scanning the shadows. Ethan tightened his grip on Claire's hand. "Stay down," he whispered. Claire's breath shook. "He's going to kill us." "No," Ethan said firmly. "He won't." A second vehicle roared into the park from the opposite end. Daniel. His SUV skidded to a halt near the pavilion. He stepped out with 2 agents flanking him, all weapons drawn. "Drop your weapon!" Daniel yelled. The false Andrew turned sharply, fury twisting across his face. He reached inside his jacket. Marie fired first. A single piercing shot tore through the quiet morning air. The false Andrew staggered, dropping the metallic object he had been reaching for. It hit the pavement with a clatter. Not a gun. A lighter. He stumbled backward, collapsing against the side of the truck. His breaths came in harsh, painful rasps. Marie approached slowly, keeping her firearm trained. "Do not move." The false Andrew looked up at her, defeat flooding across his face. "You don't know what you've started," he rasped. "There are others. You can't stop all of us." Marie didn't flinch. "We'll see about that." Daniel reached Ethan and Claire, kneeling beside them. "Are you hurt?" Claire shook her head. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "Just scared." Ethan managed a slow breath. "We're okay." Daniel placed a steady hand on Ethan's shoulder. "It's over. He won't hurt either of you again." The false Andrew was arrested, his hands cuffed behind his back. He didn't resist. He only glared at Claire, a quiet rage simmering beneath the surface. "You ruined everything," he hissed. Claire looked away. Daniel guided Ethan and Claire back toward the SUV. The sun had finally risen, casting soft gold across the park, illuminating the broken sedan, the scattered debris, and the shadows of the night that had almost ended everything. As they stepped into Daniel's vehicle, Claire's knees buckled. Ethan caught her gently. "You're safe," he whispered. Her arms wrapped around him, fragile but desperate. "Thank you," she breathed. "You didn't have to stay. You didn't have to help me." Ethan held her close. "I wasn't going to leave you." Marie slid into the passenger seat, speaking softly. "Let's go home." The drive back was quiet. The adrenaline faded slowly, replaced by exhaustion and a fragile sense of relief. Claire rested her head against Ethan's shoulder, her breathing steady, her hand gripping his lightly. Hours later, after statements were given and medical checks completed, Ethan stepped out of the building into a soft afternoon breeze. Claire followed him, appearing steadier now, though the weight of everything lingered in her tired eyes. She approached him slowly. "Can we talk?" He nodded. They walked to a quiet bench near the parking lot. The sun was sinking lower, warm light stretching across the pavement. Claire sat down first, folding her hands in her lap. "I've been thinking about everything," she said softly. "About the last few days. About you." Ethan listened, patient. "You could have walked away," she said. "You didn't know me. You owed me nothing. But you kept showing up, even when it put you in danger." Ethan shook his head. "I couldn't leave you to face this alone." Claire's eyes softened. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to," he said. She looked at him for a long moment, long enough that the heaviness in her expression slowly began to lift. "But I want to," she whispered. Ethan exhaled, feeling something inside him settle. "Start by taking care of yourself," he said. "The rest comes after." Claire reached out hesitantly, brushing her fingers against his. "When all of this settles down, maybe we could start over. A normal beginning, without flat tires and kidnappings." Ethan let out a soft, genuine laugh, quiet but warm. "I'd like that." Claire's smile was small but real, the kind born not of relief but possibility. Marie and Daniel approached from a distance, giving them space before speaking. "It's done," Daniel said. "Warrants have been issued based on the evidence Claire discovered. Multiple arrests are being made as we speak." Claire's breath trembled. "So it's finally over." Marie nodded gently. "It's over." Ethan slipped his hand fully into Claire's, a small gesture, but grounding. Daniel continued, "We'll help you relocate temporarily until you decide your next steps. But you're safe now, truly." Claire leaned her head against Ethan's shoulder. "I think," she whispered, "I finally believe that." Ethan wrapped an arm around her, holding her close as the sun dipped lower, washing the world in soft amber light. The danger had passed. The fear had lifted. And in its place, something new began to take shape. A quiet, steady resilience, and the fragile hope of a future neither of them had expected, but both were willing to reach for. Together. And for the first time since the morning on that lonely roadside, Ethan felt the world settle into something warm again. Not perfect, not healed, but safe, and moving forward. A real ending and a real beginning.